In this assignment, you're going to be evaluating a poster that you find online based on the reading you do for Unit 3, Assignment 1. You're going to be looking at 5 psychological studies that tell us how people perceive visual information. Side note, this is the website, it's a blog, and this is also a template gallery that you can create and generate posters. You can make your poster in any of the software that's available out there, Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Photoshop, Illustrator, or you can come here. But I do ask, if you do use these templates, be sure that you substantially reorganize them based on your own decisions. Don't just use their information. So in other words, I had a student last year use this coffee versus tea for her infographic project, and she just changed a couple numbers. It is not enough to do that. I'm going to ask that you're actually laying out, you're selecting the color, you're choosing the imagery and the fonts on your own based on the reading in this article. So read the article first, come over here, and the first thing they talk about is Gregory's visual assumption theory and what is top-down processing. The basic gist of this is that immediately when you look at a poster or a graphic, you should understand what it is about within the first second. And that is based on a number of things, but first and foremost, it's the layout, the composition of the poster. If you've ever read Malcolm Gladwell's Blink, he talks about this, the initial response to something, and great decision makers are often people who go with the very first instinct, their first decision. And if you've ever second guessed yourself, you've probably often found that maybe the first thing you thought of was the better choice. So we want to provide a good framework for your viewers to look at your poster and immediately know what it's about. There's going to be these visual takeaways from each section in the article, and the first one is complement your data with relevant themes and designs, use meaningful headlines that set expectations, and the visuals are going to help support the content in your poster and also in the poster that you evaluate. So using strategies to immediately set an expectation will set the tone for what your poster is about. And this is the poster that I'm going to evaluate for assignment 1. I immediately know what this is about based on 2 things. The layout. There's a cyclist at the very top. He's the first thing you see. He's high contrast. He's large. So I immediately know this is about mountain biking. And then I read on. And in this poster, I'm not sure immediately what Celebrate Brooklyn is about, but as you read on, then you start to learn. It doesn't work quite as well because you want to hook your viewer right away and get their interest right from the very beginning. Whether or not you're into music or mountain biking is irrelevant. If there's a person who is interested in that, you want their attention from the very second they see the image. The next part of the article, they talk a little bit about color and color palettes. The basic gist is that people, when they're looking at patterns within color palettes, the patterns that are more easily memorized are the ones that have the simpler color palettes. And if there is an off color, they call it a disharmonious color, or I call it an accent color. It's used strategically. So the visual takeaway for that in your poster is to use simplified color palettes, use high contrast in order to be able to read all of the information. And if you're going to use disharmonious or an accent color, use the accent color in a smart manner. Try to accent something that's important. So in this particular case, the off color, the accent color, the disharmonious color, yellow, is employed in these motion lines, which help reinforce the message that this is about a downhill mountain bike marathon championship. And in this particular case, there's no accent color that really stands out. So say for instance, if this poster were a simpler color palette and free were green, free would stand out. They would be using that accent color in a smart manner. In other words, they would be highlighting an important aspect of this. But in this case, it's just too many colors. There's just too much going on. So we don't know what the hierarchy is, and we don't understand what is the first piece of information that's most important. The next thing they talk about in the article is binocular rivalry phenomenon, and what this is really is competing images. When images are of the same scale but are vastly different, we don't know what the hierarchy is, and we don't know what's most important. So you want to avoid that, and in this particular case, there's a lot of competition between images and text and color, so we don't know what's most important. The takeaway from that is don't clutter your content and highlight important things. And in the case of the mountain biker, he's highlighted by being in high contrast and being at the very top of the layout. The last thing they talk about is typography. And in a study, they found that people who read information that is in a more difficult to read font, they don't memorize that reading the same way that they would if it were a more readable font. So in other words, fonts that are more easily read, the information is more efficiently retained. And we want that. We want the information from our poster to be stuck in people's heads. Here's a great example. So cider, the original drink of America. Cider is a little bit difficult to read, but it's large, it's a simple word, and original drink of America helps support it, so I understand what it's about. The color also supports this poster. It's a muted palette from the 1940s. So what this does is everything supports the idea that cider, which is a little bit fun and kind of, a scripted font, it supports that. That is the important thing, and everything else is clear, easy to read, and it sticks with you. This scripted font, not so easily read, and although it does help support the idea that the pen is mightier than the sword, it's a bit overly stylized. It's very interesting to look at, but it just doesn't stick with you the way that a clear font would. And in this particular case, the dirty projectors is what this says. You wouldn't get that right away. It's a little hard to read. The color doesn't exactly tell me this is about projection, digital projection. And so the hard to read font, the variety of colors, and the disorganization kind of actually subtract from the message. We want to avoid that. So evaluating my poster, this is really first about hierarchy, and I'm going through the steps in the reading. Hierarchy, top-down processing theory states that when the single image is the largest element, we immediately understand what the design message is, and he's placed at the very top. That helps because as we read down, top to bottom, we get more and more detailed information, but the big picture is it's about mountain biking. And that layout is top to bottom built in threes, divided into three. Three is a great design number. The title of the event is second, and then any relevant detailed information, if you happen to be interested in this event, can be found at the bottom. The color palette helps support the message, and by and large, the color sampling for this is larger, simplified color palette with a very small accent color, which is strategically used. There is no binocular rivalry in this. So in other words, the trees that are in the background, 3 of them equal 1 cyclist. So they're scaled down, they're a little smaller. Same thing with the mountain in the background. It's muted, it's pushed back, it's lower contrast. So therefore, the higher contrast, larger image is the cyclist, and he is at the top, so there's no rivalry. Secondly, the font is very clear, it's legible, and it's appropriate for the event. So you might use script or you might use some other font, but that font should help reinforce the message overall. But this font is both easily read and does have some relationship to mountain biking. It's sporty. Your evaluation of the poster is going to look like this. You can build it in PowerPoint or Microsoft Word or Pixlr and Photoshop or Illustrator. Whatever software you want to use is fine. But what you want to do is show us, use callouts to show us how this poster is successful based on the reading. So using that information to help support your claims for why this is a strong poster, why it has immediate impact, and why font and color are used in a strong manner to help visually communicate.